Why is Australia not putting Australians first, especially in the middle of a housing crisis? This is a question I've been asking myself for 5 years, but no matter how hard I look, policies keep reinforcing this belief. Aussies are doing it extremely tough at the moment, especially those in the unfortunate position of not being able to afford a home. Yet instead of doing everything in our power to support these Australian citizens, they're abandoned time and time again, and housing keeps getting further and further out of reach. I'm Biko Konstantinos, and that's what we're going to talk about today. My son was doing a history assignment the other day and asked me what I knew about Galileo. I said, he was just a poor boy from a poor family. And if you remember that song, make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you don't remember that song, you must be bloody young, and what are you doing here on my channel? But please stay. I might be nearly 50, but I've got the body of a Greek Adonis. Try hard Adonis. Now let's see why Aussies aren't being put first when it comes to housing.
Wait until you see and hear these ads that have been produced by the federal government. This morning, One Nation is demanding answers. They want to know why Anthony Albanese is marketing affordable housing schemes to foreigners. Aren't they designed to get young Aussies into homes?
Yes, they are. And even the government is promoting it that way. The Albanese government has now helped more than 250,000 Australians buy a home through the 5% deposit scheme. So if this policy was a specific pitch to be able to help more Aussies get into the housing market earlier, why would they be running ads in foreign languages to promote the scheme? That's a good question.
These ads have been produced in Arabic and Mandarin. And I'm going to play one for you right now. This is the one in Mandarin.
對好多澳洲人而言，置業似乎遙不可及。但而家澳洲政府5% deposit scheme 已經推出新安排。請瀏覽 firsthomebuyers.gov.au.
Now, I've got nothing against translating information in foreign languages in general, but seeing this ad just feels wrong to me, especially in the middle of a housing crisis where millions of Australians are completely locked out of the housing market. I feel like the average Aussie wage earner who doesn't get assistance from their parents to get a home keeps getting pushed down time and time again when it comes to housing. And these ads just feel like another kick in the guts.
So there's the Mandarin version of the ad, and One Nation says the Albanese government continues to work against the interests of Australian people. Promoting a housing scheme to foreigners in foreign languages does not help Australians secure affordable accommodation or help Australians to enter the housing market.
It actually makes it worse for Australian citizens because the more people accessing the scheme just adds increased demand for overall housing, which pushes up house prices. And that's my problem with this scheme and pretty much every other first home buyer scheme ever announced by Australian governments. Instead of trying to actually make housing more affordable, which means they either have to go down or not grow anywhere near as fast, we always seem to take the easy path of pumping extra demand, but hopefully looking like we're helping. To me, that's kicking the can down the road, and if you keep doing that long enough, it always ends in disaster. But the other reason I dislike this policy so much is because the government recently increased the price that the scheme could be applied for, but also introduced no caps on the number of people who could apply, but also no income tests whatsoever. So that means multi-millionaires who didn't even need the scheme anyway are able to access it and take advantage of and not paying any loan mortgage insurance because the government takes care of it as part of this scheme. So the fact that I feel that this 5% deposit scheme has actually made the Australian housing crisis worse, combined with the revelation that non-Australian citizens are able to access it, well, that's just doubly freaking bad, isn't it?
Now, the Albanese government introduced a temporary ban on foreigners buying established property. That was in 2025. They then extended that until 2027. and foreigners can still buy new or near new dwellings, off-the-plan properties, vacant residential land and established dwellings for redevelopment.
Yes, I support the ban and I'd like to see it become a permanent feature, but one thing I'd really love to see is a much greater crackdown on money laundering into Australian property. In the AusTrack Money Laundering Report for 2024, it classified domestic real estate as posing a very high and stable money laundering vulnerability. AusTrack also estimated that criminals linked to China laundered around $1 billion through Australian real estate in 2020 alone. Just imagine what it might be today. So we've got foreign money from criminal activities being laundered through Australian property, whilst at the same time we're advertising first home buyer schemes in foreign languages. It just doesn't look good.
So the question for Anthony Albanese is this. If the 5% deposit scheme is all about getting young Aussies into homes, why are we promoting the ads like this? This one is in Arabic.
بالنسبة للعديد من الأستراليين يبدو امتلاك منزل أمراً بعيد المنال، لكن الآن يمكن لجميع مشتري المنزل الأول الاستفادة.
I wonder what they'd show if they had an ad in Greek. Someone pruning their lemon tree, cooking up some souvlaki, putting olive oil on absolutely freaking everything.
Labor says the ads are simply following standard guidelines and the scheme is limited to Australian citizens and permanent residents. But it's that part there that's got the Coalition and One Nation concerned, and permanent residents. In other words, it's not just for Aussie citizens.
That's the kicker. When you've got millions of Australian citizens who absolutely cannot get into the housing market, why would you support anyone else getting into the market? Sure, if we had a stack of oversupply and rental vacancy rates were above 3%, maybe it'd be fine. But with rental vacancy rates in Australia being close to 1% and having been there for the past 5 freaking years, then no, I don't think it's a good idea.
Labor expanded it to include permanent residents in 2023, a move the Coalition has vowed to reverse after 51,000 non-citizens took advantage of it. That's the real story. 51,000 people who are non-citizens are taking advantage of this scheme that is supposed to help young Aussies into a house.
51,000's a lot. And to think that some of them could come from extremely wealthy families as well, well, that just feels like another level of betrayal. But someone else who heard this figure and completely unleashed on the government is Dave Hughes.
And for that first home buyers grant, you know, the first home buyers scheme, I heard Albo on the radio yesterday and he goes, oh yeah, they don't have to be citizens because there's some countries that don't allow dual citizenship. There's over 50,000 people who don't want to give up their citizenship of their home country. He's given them our money to buy houses in Australia.
Hughesy passionately sticking up for Australian citizens. This is absolutely great to see. This is nothing against people who aren't Australian citizens. It's just saying that Australian citizens in Australia should be put first. That's what happens with the citizens of nearly every other country across the world. So why shouldn't it also happen in Australia?
I'm happy for you can stay here, and if you want to go home, you can go home. But you're not getting our money to buy houses here. That's insane. So 50,000 non-citizens have been bidding at auctions against Australians. Well, with our money.
Excellent point, Hughesy. Not only has the 5% deposit scheme added extra demand from Aussies taking advantage of it and bidding up house prices, there's now over 50,000 non-citizens that are added to that mix, making things even worse. And the reason Hughesy calls it our money is because the money collected from Australian taxes pay for these schemes. And the more the government has to spend on schemes like the 5% deposit, well, the more money they're going to have to find. And often that means more freaking taxes.
The people in charge of our country are idiots, and they treat our money like they found it in a sack by the river and they've got to spend it before someone finds out.
Hughesy's absolutely unleashing on primetime television. Do you think it's warranted? For me, the citizens of a country absolutely have to come first when it comes to housing. But this 5% deposit scheme is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to pumping up house prices. If Australia really wanted to improve housing affordability for those wanting to buy a home and also those renting, the first thing you'd do, in my opinion, is immediately slash immigration levels. Both Canada and New Zealand have seen significantly lower immigration levels over the past couple of years, and guess what's happened since then? Both countries have seen their average rent price decrease. When you have less overall people competing for housing, well, that puts downwards pressure on both house prices and rents, because there's less competition or demand, which means property owners often have to come down to meet the market. But Australia's been happy to run the country on catastrophically low rental vacancy rates, and that's an absolute disaster and all but guarantees that the housing crisis will continue. Now let's turn our attention back to the OG, Morgan Cox, who asked one of the best questions ever said on Australian TV.
I want to know, is the government going to cut immigration to match housing availability, or are we just going to keep going until every regular working Australian is homeless?
Summed up perfectly. I'm Biko Konstantinos.